Hi, I'm Admiral Brad Cooper, Commander of U.S. Central Command, here with my fifth update on Operation Epic Fury. We're in the fourth week of the campaign and remain on plan or ahead of plan in achieving very clear military objectives for eliminating Iran's ability to project power in meaningful ways outside its borders. U.S. forces have
jets targeting military and security targets in Iran. U.S. officials are also telling our team that the U.S. is
increasingly strained, with reports of some Basij units on the run. That comes as Israel escalates its campaign, eliminating key Iranian officials with
I am looking at a diplomatic cable leaked from Tehran just 45 minutes ago, and it confirms our worst fears. Trump's 15-point ultimate deal hasn't just been ignored, it has been set on fire. As I record this, the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East is shifting more in an hour than it usually does in a decade. We are witnessing a total regional collapse of the established order and the visible failure of the peace through strength doctrine that has defined American foreign policy for the last several months. Global oil benchmarks have already begun an immediate surge, with Brent crude spiking as traders price in the reality that this conflict is no longer contained. The stakes could not be higher. We are talking about the potential for a complete breakdown of international maritime law and a war that could draw in every major power on the planet. Today, I am going to reveal the 5 non-negotiable demands that Iran has sent back to the West Wing, demands that have reportedly left the Pentagon leadership speechless. This is the Red Folder response, a counter-ultimatum that changes the rules of engagement entirely. Within the next 20 minutes, we will explore why a key NATO ally just signaled behind closed doors that they will back Iran's third and most controversial demand. If you want to understand why your energy bills and the value of your currency are suddenly at the mercy of a document sitting in the Oval Office, you need to hear what is in these chapters. To establish the baseline, we have to look at the wreckage of the 15-point plan. The Trump administration's proposal was less of a negotiation and more of a strategic autopsy. It demanded the total and verifiable dismantling of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, including the decommissioning of the Fordow and Natanz facilities. Furthermore, it insisted on the immediate end of the so-called land bridge, the logistical corridor stretching through Iraq and Syria into Lebanon. The density of these demands was high, designed to strip Tehran of its regional leverage in one fell swoop. Imagine the silence in the Situation Room as the reports came in. The Iranian envoy walked out of the neutral zone in Oman without shaking a single hand, a gesture of diplomatic frost that hasn't been seen since the height of the Cold War. The administration thought they were holding all the cards because of the sheer weight of the strikes launched over the last few weeks, but they forgot that Iran is playing a game where the board is 2,000 miles wide. The 15-point plan was designed as an ultimatum, an all-or-nothing play for total Iranian capitulation. It backfired within 12 hours because it left no room for the face-saving measures that Middle Eastern diplomacy requires. But the rejection itself isn't the story. The story is the counteroffer that just landed on the president's desk. To understand why Iran feels they can make these demands now, even after sustaining significant damage to their command structure, we have to look at the Dark Fleet movement in the Persian Gulf. This is where the narrative of the war shifts from defense to a very aggressive form of counteroffense. The first 2 demands from Tehran represent what analysts are calling the sovereign shield. Demand number 1 is the immediate and unconditional removal of all United States carrier strike groups from the Fifth Fleet's area of responsibility. This isn't just about moving ships. It is a demand for the total evacuation of the American naval umbrella that has protected the flow of oil since the 1940s. Demand number 2 is the formal recognition of a security corridor stretching from Tehran to the Mediterranean. Iran is essentially asking for a legal keep-out zone that encompasses Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, effectively codifying their sphere of influence into international law. To understand the weight of this, we have to look at a historical parallel: the 1980s tanker war. During that era, the United States launched Operation Praying Mantis, which destroyed half of Iran's navy in a single day after a U.S. frigate hit a mine. Back then, Iran learned that they couldn't win a direct surface engagement. However, the current sovereign shield is a direct evolution of that failure. This time, they aren't relying on a few frigates. They have the missile density and the drone swarms to actually win a modern war of the tankers. They have spent 40 years preparing for this exact moment. The hidden truth here is that Iran isn't just asking for space or a ceasefire. They are asking for the keys to the world's most vital energy artery. They aren't asking for peace. They are asking for a surrender of American influence in the East. There is a concept in military strategy most people never encounter because it's usually buried in doctoral theses at the War College. It's called the Anti-Access Area Denial Bubble, or A2/AD. Iran just inflated that bubble and told the U.S. that any entry into it will result in the immediate sinking of commercial and military vessels alike. If you think these two demands are bold, wait until you hear what they are demanding regarding the global banking system. This brings us to demand number 3, the swift severance. Iran is demanding a parallel financial architecture. They aren't just asking for the removal of sanctions. They are demanding total immunity from the United States Treasury's jurisdiction and guaranteed, unfiltered access to the euro clearing system. Essentially, they want to be part of the global economy while remaining completely invisible to American financial monitors. There is a historical parallel here that should make every economist's blood run cold: the 1973 oil embargo. In 1973, the OPEC nations used oil as a political weapon, causing a 400% price hike and crippling the Western economy for a decade. The current demand for swift severance isn't just about trade. It is about using energy as a financial scalpel to bleed the Western consumer. If Iran can trade oil without the US dollar, the petrodollar system, the very foundation of American global hegemony, begins to crumble. We are looking at numerical chaos here. There is a $2.3 trillion threat to the petrodollar if Iran successfully bridges its oil trade with the BRICS plus digital currency. Imagine a world where the US dollar is no longer the world reserve currency. Your purchasing power, your savings, and the cost of every imported good in your home would vanish or skyrocket overnight because of a deal made in a bunker in Tehran. This isn't a trade deal. It's a financial declaration of independence that targets the heart of the American wallet. Let's do a value validation check here. I told you I'd show you why this hits your gas prices. Market data indicates that what we call the Hormuz surcharge is already being applied to insurance premiums for shipping. Even if a single shot isn't fired today, the mere demand for financial autonomy by a major oil producer sends a signal to the markets that the era of cheap, dollar-backed energy is over. But there's a fourth demand that involves a secret pact with a certain superpower in the East that makes the financial threat look like a minor inconvenience. Demand number 4 is what I call the Dragon's Breath Pact. Iran is demanding legal, international protection for their 25-year strategic partnership with China. This includes the right to host joint military bases on Iranian soil. This is the pattern interrupt the administration didn't see coming. We have to talk about your money and your security, because this demand just hit the supply chain tripwire. The reason the 38 generals at the Pentagon are reportedly terrified by this is simple. This demand makes a U.S.-Iran war a U.S.-China war by proxy. If Chinese personnel are stationed at Iranian naval bases as trainers or observers, any American strike on Iranian infrastructure becomes an attack on a nuclear-armed superpower. Trump's original goal with the 15-point plan was to isolate Iran and force them to the table alone. Instead, Iran just invited the world's second-largest economy to move into his backyard and set up shop. This is a masterstroke of leverage. Iran knows that the United States cannot afford a two-front naval war in the Persian Gulf and the South China Sea simultaneously. By tying their fate to Beijing, they have created a poison pill for any future military escalation. Wait, there's an even graver aspect I haven't disclosed yet. The fifth demand doesn't involve soldiers or money. It involves the most terrifying technology on the planet. We are moving into the final, most dangerous demand. The one the CIA previously stated was a red line that could never be crossed. The fifth and final demand centers on the button
of the modern military. Never in recorded history has a nation's military been so quickly and effectively neutralized. Operation Epic Fury is not an endless war. It's a decisive campaign with clear objectives to destroy Iran's offensive military capabilities and ensure they never obtain a nuclear weapon. This is stuff for the history books. This is stuff for legacy. Mr. President, you are acting now to ensure future
highest order. Iran is demanding the right to enrich uranium to 90% purity, ostensibly for research, without the oversight of UN inspections. This would effectively be the end of the Non-Proliferation Treaty as we know it. But there is an even more modern twist, the AI component. Iran is demanding access to Western-origin large language models and high-end processing power to optimize their drone swarms and cyber warfare capabilities. They are calling it a digital warhead. Looking back at history, we can see a reverse Cuban Missile Crisis. In 1962, the world held its breath as the US and the Soviets stood on the brink over missiles in Turkey and Cuba. That crisis was resolved through a hotline and a mutual pullback. However, this demand puts the US in the exact same corner the Soviets were in, but without a reliable hotline to stop the clock. This isn't just about a bomb anymore. It's about an AI-integrated nuclear state that the West can no longer patch or update out of existence. If the president says yes, the world order as we've known it since 1945 changes forever. If he says no,
I'm Admiral
the
Brad
sirens
Cooper,
start.
Commander of U.S. Central
There is
Command,
no third
here with
option
my
that
fifth
doesn't
update
involve
on
one of
Operation
these
Epic
two
Fury.
radical realities.
We're in the fourth
So,
week of the
how does the
campaign
White
and
House
remain
respond?
on plan
The
or
red
ahead of
folder
plan in
is on the
achieving
desk,
very
containing
clear
the
military
only three
objectives
options
for
left for the
eliminating Iran's
administration.
ability to
They can
project
accept
power
the
in meaningful
demands
ways
and
outside its
essentially
borders.
manage the decline of
U.S.
American
forces have
influence in the
jets
region. They
targeting
can launch a
military and
full-scale
security targets in
decapitation
Iran.
strike, which
US
risks a
officials are
global
also
war with
telling our
China,
team that the
or they
US
can
is
attempt a
increasingly
desperate
strained,
third-way
with reports of
sabotage
some
that may
besieged
only
units
delay
on the
the
run.
inevitable.
That comes as
Synthesizing
Israel
these five
escalates its
demands,
campaign,
we see that they aren't
eliminating
just
key
points for
Iranian
discussion.
officials with
They are a blueprint for a post-American Middle East. The hidden reality is that some insiders believe the U.S. might actually pivot and accept demand number 3, the financial concessions, just to avoid a global energy blackout that would crash the domestic economy before the next election. As we move toward the Monday market open, the strategic advice from top analysts is clear: focus on asset protection. Gold, the energy sector, and cybersecurity stocks are the only hedges against a weekend where a single no from Washington could trigger the tripwire. They want you to be afraid of the headlines. I want you to be informed by the data. The tripwire has been pulled. If you want to be the first to know when Option 9, the secret contingency, goes live, hit that subscribe button. Your survival in this economy depends on the speed of your information. How is this story being covered where you live right now? Do you see the effects of these tensions in your local fuel prices or grocery bills yet? Which of the 3 scenarios, capitulation, strike, or sabotage, do you consider most likely in the next 72 hours? Let me know in the comments. The 15-point plan is dead. Long live the new, more dangerous reality. We'll continue tracking this situation. See you in the next report. The fuse isn't just lit. It's been dipped in liquid oxygen and shoved into the bedrock of the global financial architecture. Stop thinking about this as a trade dispute. That's a sedative for the masses. This is an asymmetric decapitation strike against the dollar's hegemony. While we've been obsessing over the 3 public demands, something far more sinister is crawling through the subcables of the Atlantic. My sources in the gray zones of Zurich and Singapore are flagging a massive, synchronized liquidation of short-dated treasury bills. This isn't a nervous market correction. This is economic arson. It's one thing to threaten a blackout. It's quite another to dismantle the very plumbing of the Western bank system. When the market opens on Monday, don't look at the ticker prices. Look at the liquidity spreads. If the bid-ask gap for crude oil widens by more than $3 in the first 10 minutes, you aren't looking at a price hike. You're looking at the death of the spot market. Let's dismantle the financial concessions everyone is whispering about. They isn't asking for a bailout. They are extorting a permanent tax. Imagine a world where every single transaction involving heavy rare earth minerals requires a direct tribute to a private sovereign fund based in a non-extradition territory. That is what's on the table. It's a neo-feudal shakedown. Washington is paralyzed. On one side, the hawks are screaming for a kinetic response. Carrier groups, drone swarms, the whole cinematic display of 20th century power. On the other side, the technocrats realize that if a single localized EMP, electromagnetic pulse, hits the North Sea hubs, the American Midwest loses its power grid in 48 hours. The interdependence we were told was a safety net has become a stranglehold. Picture the war room right now. It smells like stale coffee and ozone. There are analysts who haven't seen sunlight in 3 days, staring at heat maps of the South China Sea and the Baltic pipeline corridors. They aren't looking for ships anymore. They are looking for anomalous signatures. Asterisk, why did a civilian research vessel stop for 6 hours over the main fiber optic trunk? Asterisk, why did the central bank of a third-tier power just move 40 tons of bullion into a private vault in Dubai? These aren't coincidences. These are pre-deployment maneuvers. I mentioned Option 9. Most people think it's an evacuation plan. It isn't. Option 9 is the scorched earth digital protocol. It is the systemic isolation of the domestic banking network from the global internet. In plain English, it's the national intranet. If the cyber sabotage begins on Sunday night, the White House has the authority to flip the kill switch on all outgoing financial data to prevent a total capital flight. You wake up Monday, and your bank app works, but you can't send a wire to London. You can't buy a stock on the Nikkei. You are trapped in a financial terrarium. Can you feel it yet? Walk into your local supermarket this evening. Look at the shelf of imported produce. Notice the slight, almost imperceptible gap where the high-end electronics used to be. Listen to the tone of the news anchors, that clipped, high-pitched, everything is fine cadence that usually precedes a total narrative collapse. The air feels heavy because the volatility index isn't just a number on a screen. It's the collective pulse of a civilization realizing its just-in-time supply chain is a suicide pact. While the U.S. pivots toward Demand 3, the Red Gold Alliance is tightening the noose. They aren't waiting for a yes or no. They are terraforming the trade routes. By the time the State Department finishes its memo, the new pipelines will already be pressurized. The new digital currency bridges will already be carrying the weight of half the world's GDP. We are watching the unboxing of a new era. And the old era? It's being sold for scrap. So what is your move? If you're sitting on cash, you're holding a melting ice cube. If you're waiting for guidance from the mainstream networks, you're already behind the curve. The elite aren't buying gold bars. They are buying sovereignty. They are securing physical assets, land with independent water rights, and private communication nodes. They are preparing for a dark winter that has nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with the evaporation of trust. Let's talk about the black swan contingencies. If the negotiations fail by midnight Sunday, we aren't looking at a gradual decline. We are looking at a gaping maw. This sabotage scenario isn't a bomb in a building. It's a logic bomb in the clearing software of the New York Stock Exchange. One line of corrupted code, one zero-day exploit, and suddenly, nobody knows who owns what. The ledger is wiped. The debt is erased, but so is the wealth. That is the ultimate leverage. Give us what we want, or we delete the concept of ownership. 18 hours. That's what's left on the countdown before the first markets in Wellington and Sydney open their doors to the most volatile session in 40 years. The tripwire wasn't a warning. It was a detonator. I've spent 20 years tracking these cycles, and I've never seen the indicators hit the red zone like this. The convergence of energy scarcity, monetary debasement, and state-sponsored cyber warfare is the perfect storm. And you are standing in the middle of the field with a metal umbrella. Don't be fooled by this stability of the weekend. The silence you hear isn't peace. It's the vacuum that occurs right before a massive explosion. The players are in position. The pieces are moving. The scripts have been written, and you weren't given a copy. Except for this one. Before you go to sleep tonight, do 3 things. 1. Verify your physical holdings. If it isn't in your hand, it might not exist on Monday. 2. Audit your digital footprint. Can you function if the external web goes dark for 48 hours? 3. Secure your perimeter. Not just your home, but your information flow. If you're relying on an algorithm to tell you the truth, you've already lost. The 15-point plan was a fairy tale for the complacent. The reality is a raw, unfiltered power grab. What happens on Tuesday? If the capitulation occurs, we see a short-term rally, a dead cat bounce of epic proportions. The media will celebrate. They will say the crisis was averted. But the price of that peace is the permanent forfeiture of American economic autonomy. We will be a client state, a highly advanced, high-consumption vassal. Is that the world you want to live in? A world where your freedom is a subscription service provided by a foreign conglomerate? I'm going to stay in this chair. I'm going to keep the monitors running. I'm going to keep my ear to the ground in the dark web forums where the real deals are being brokered. Because when the option 9 alert hits my terminal, I won't have time to make a polished video. It will be a raw feed, a burst of data.
The modern military. Never in recorded history has a nation's military been so quickly and effectively
people are still looking at the reflection
Operation
in the
Epic
rearview
Fury is
mirror,
not an endless
not realizing the car has
It's a
already
decisive
gone over the
campaign
cliff.
with clear
I'll ask you
objectives to
again.
destroy
Look at the
Iran's
prices at your local
offensive
phone.
military
Don't look at the
capabilities can
number. Look at the
ensure
frequency of the change.
they never obtain
If they are
a
changing
nuclear
the signs
weapon.
twice
This
a day,
is
the
stuff
hyperinflationary
for the
feedback
history
loop
books.
has begun.
This
isn't a
stuff
drill.
for
This
legacy.
isn't a simulation.
Mr. President,
This
you
is
are
the
acting
unraveling.
now to
Stay
ensure
frosty.
future
Stay liquid. And for God's sake, stay informed. The Monday Open is coming for all of us.